Hello, this is CJ Radoon of RotoWire.com here for your Formula One update on mystery caution. Be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of our motorsports videos all season long, including NASCAR, IndyCar, and Formula One. And you can access my columns by clicking the link provided in the description of this video. And if you have any questions or comments, let me know what is on your mind. So coming up this week, we've got the Formula One Rolex Australian Grand Prix. But as always, we look back to see what happened last time out. Last time out, we were at Saudi Arabia. And yet again, Max Verstappen was the man to beat. He won his second race of the season from pole. He led 45 of 50 laps, and he beat teammate Sergio Perez by more than 13 seconds. Very exciting start to the season, completely unpredictable. That one was totally expected. But it wasn't as straightforward as it was in Bahrain due to a couple of safety car issues, some pit strategy differences, and that enabled Lando Norris actually to get out in front for a handful of laps. But, looking back on it, the entire race was effectively dominated by Red Bull and Verstappen. No surprise there. We predicted that in advance, and that's exactly how it played out, even with the safety car. So looking beyond that, though, that second place finish for Perez in the other Red Bull car, that was further evidence that his struggles from last year might be in the rearview mirror. Talked a lot last year in 2023 about how him being in the same car as Max Verstappen, he should have been doing a lot better. Seems like at least early so far this year, he's actually living up to that. He's coming in second pretty handily, which is good for him. And that's exactly where he should be, if he's not winning. If Verstappen has any problems, it should be Perez that's stepping up and taking that top spot on the podium ahead of the Ferraris. And actually, if you look at the finishing gap in Saudi Arabia, he beat Ferrari's Charles Leclerc by 5 seconds. That's no small margin, certainly when Ferrari's been closing the gap to Red Bull regardless. So last week, again, real stories beyond that which was predicted of Red Bull's dominance really begin with Ferrari. Leclerc put his car on the front row again. Teammate Carlos Sainz, though, that was the real story. He was ill, so he didn't get to take part in the race. And actually, he was out there in practice, but soon after that, we learned that he actually suffered appendicitis and had to undergo emergency surgery. And he was to be replaced and was replaced by rookie Oliver Bearman. And what a replacement he was, with no time really to speak of in the car. Bearman put it 11th in qualifying, and then he went on in the race despite all those issues, survived the safety car, survived the hecticness of that race just in total, and finished seventh place, earning his first Formula One points in the series in his rookie outing, his very first outing for Ferrari. Just an incredible performance for him. He is somebody that you're going to want to watch in the F2 series. He races there full time. We'll talk a little bit more about when we expect to see him again, maybe this weekend. It's not looking likely, but Oliver Bearman, definitely super sub for the last time out in Saudi Arabia, a name you want to keep in your head for the future. Behind him, Oscar Piastri, or I guess maybe not behind him, but other drivers to talk about: Oscar Piastri, Fernando Alonso, George Russell. They all actually finished ahead of Bearman, but it was a fantastic effort for him nonetheless. And those drivers, honestly, those are the ones that should be. They're the best of the rest, behind Red Bull and Ferrari. That battle getting a little bit closer, but behind that, really, you've got Mercedes, you've got McLaren, you've got Aston Martin. It's really not different than 2023. That is where those guys should have been finishing regardless. Best of the race, though, McLaren. So Piastri finished fourth. He was far behind Leclerc, but nonetheless, he was best of the rest outside of Red Bull and McLaren. Of Red Bull and Ferrari. So while Norris cycled to the lead in the McLaren for a little bit, Alonso was in fifth. It looks like, again, for 2024, that battle that I mentioned before, McLaren, Mercedes, Aston Martin, to be best of the rest behind the Red Bull and the Ferrari. That's what we're looking forward to here in 2024, and it looks like it's going to be a close one again through this season. So what was the biggest surprise? Well, I already talked about it. It's Oliver Bearman. Came out of nowhere. Those of you who follow F2 know his name, certainly. But this was his first step up into Formula One. This was his first step up in competition on a Formula One weekend, and he got the late call. He didn't have practice on Friday. He just jumped in and qualified the thing. He spends his time, as I mentioned, in F2. He finished sixth in that championship last season. It was an impressive debut for him. That definitely turned a lot of heads, and I got to say, it's not going to be long until we see him back in Formula One. Depending on Sainz's recovery, as I said, it could be as soon as this weekend. So, what is happening this weekend? We're at Australia, Formula One Rolex Australian Grand Prix, and we are at the Albert Park Circuit, which is a makeshift street course that features long, fast straights, and it's interspersed with tight chicanes. It's just over 5 kilometers long, and it has 14 turns and 2 DRS zones. There is space to pass under the heavy braking into those tight chicanes, but the track is also known for contact in those areas. With passing and with close racing comes contact, and that means safety cars. So they're going to be another likely event to look out for here this weekend. Formula One first started racing at the circuit back in 1996, and this weekend's race will be the 27th time the series has visited. Max Verstappen won the race last season, and fans will remember that the ending to that one being a chaotic shambles when the red flag was shown a lap prior to the checkered flag, and then a formation lap ended the race. And hopefully we don't see that same chaos and controversy yet again this year. It was really a strange circumstance because with I think in the last 2 or 3 laps, there were 2 red flags, and then they insisted on doing a formation lap to take the cars around on the final lap, only to have them regrid in the spots that they were already set to then declare the race final. It was absolutely confounding, confusing, just absolutely terrible. Some people that had crashed, they put back in their original positions. It was just crazy. There was a penalty that was assessed that with no chance to be able to serve it, considering it was a formation lap, like a 5-second penalty. You just can't have that happen again. So that was a black eye actually on the Australian race last year. Really fingers crossed Formula One has their act together this time. But again, aside from all those types of unpredictable events, qualifying is going to be a big determinant of success this weekend. Ferrari's been doing a good job of getting onto the front row, doing so again this week, and put them second on the podium. The biggest problem they're going to face, again, is their lack of race pace over a full tire stint, though. Red Bull just has that upper hand. So Ferrari qualifying well and then striking off the line to get the Red Bull cars behind them, specifically Max Verstappen, then being able to manage the race strategy from the front, in other words, holding up Verstappen and Perez, that's going to be their goal. Ferrari is relatively close to the Red Bull in the first few laps, but as that stint goes on, those tires wear, that gap widens later on in the stint. So they need to be able to strike early, which means qualifying well, and then beating both Verstappen and Perez off of the line. If they can get the pole position, Leclerc, even better, a better chance for them to lead going into turn 1. Still going to be very, very hard for them to do that, but that's going to be the best path forward or best chance that they have at being able to fight for the win. So regardless of all that, Ferrari has clearly cut the gap to Red Bull last season. And in fact, I think if you look at the finishing gaps of most races last year between Red Bull and Ferrari, it was over 20 seconds, sometimes even higher. Last week, it was about 13, 15 seconds. So they took a giant chunk of time off. So it'll be interesting to see how that Ferrari develops over the season versus what the Red Bull is able to do. See if that 13-second gap comes down any. Mercedes, they should be third best this week. So we talked a little bit about best of the rest. I think Mercedes probably has the best chance at being best of the rest this year. We're going to look at either Hamilton or Russell. They're going to be good options. You can see the odds on the screen. I think they'd be a pick for a surprise podium finish. They are going to be chased very closely from behind by Alonso and the Aston Martin and the 2 McLarens, and we'll have some statistics up for them as well. Those are the ones that I think are going to be fighting the battle behind Leclerc, Verstappen, and Perez, who are really duking it out for the podium. If anything happens to those top 3, probably expect a Mercedes to be on that podium in one of those positions, though. Even further back in the midfield, though, you got to look at Haas. Haas has continued to impress. It's 2 races into the season, so still very early, but they've made big strides up the mid-pack this winter. They should be in line for points and top 10 finishes, including this weekend here at Australia. So aside from that, what are the things that we are following this weekend in Australia? Well, first of all, Carlos Sainz, as I mentioned, wasn't able to participate in Saudi Arabia due to appendicitis and emergency surgery to get that taken care of. Last time we saw this happen was Alex Albon. He returned 2 weeks later. Everybody recovers a little bit differently. Certainly, illnesses affect everyone differently. So Carlos Sainz has been spotted in Australia. Ferrari will give an update as to who actually is going to be in the car. It is looking like Carlos Sainz is going to be back, but I'm sure Oliver Behrman is on standby if necessary. And as we saw at Saudi Arabia, it's not a bad standby to have either. So if for whatever reason Sainz isn't able to step into the car, Oliver Behrman might be a good choice for a points finish. In addition to that, we continue to follow the Red Bull Christian Horner saga. Rumors persist about an internal rift in that organization, and speculation remains rife that Verstappen actually has an exit clause now at this point if Helmut Marko is to leave. So to give you a little bit of background, we know that Christian Horner's been under fire. His position is definitely in question, being challenged within the Red Bull organization. It came out over the past week that there is actually an exit clause inserted in Verstappen's contract with Red Bull that if Helmut Marko, who is one of the figures that is in that rift with Christian Horner, if Helmut Marko leaves Red Bull, Verstappen might be able to walk as well. Very interesting development there. It would be a shocker to see Verstappen leave. Certainly, it's even a shocker just to see Christian Horner leave. I talked about how important a CEO is to an organization. Christian Horner is effectively that for this Formula One team. Max Verstappen certainly getting the best out of the car. Absolutely tremendous run of success. It would be, absolutely astounding to see either one of them leave, let alone both. And it looks like both may potentially even happen. Rumors suggest with that exit clause, if Verstappen was to leave, that he would end up going and taking Lewis Hamilton's seat as Lewis Hamilton looks to move to Ferrari for 2025. So definitely something to keep an eye out there. So in terms of picks, given those storylines, given what we learned from the first two races of the season, you got to go with Max Verstappen. His odds are not going to make you much money, but that's because he's so reliable. He's just the winner. But as we talked about in our season preview, there are strategies where you could bet somebody different, somebody other than Max Verstappen every single week. If you hit just one of those weeks with that person, you can make out for the whole year. You can actually come out positive. So this week, clearly Sergio Perez is going to be your second choice. The odds again are going to change after qualifying. I suspect it's going to be a Verstappen and Leclerc front row, maybe a Verstappen and Perez front row. If Leclerc is up there on the front row, though, he might be that one that you want to take the gamble on this week that might be able to make your whole season for you. As I said, if they're able to do it, it's going to take a move into turn one, and then they're going to have to, Leclerc in this case, manage the race from the front. In other words, hold back Verstappen, hold back Perez, disrupt their race, and get out ahead and stay ahead all the way to the finish. Looking at the winning constructor, clearly Red Bull Racing. If you want to take that contrarian bet, Ferrari. If you want a podium surprise, probably go with Mercedes, as I said, most likely George Russell, but quite honestly, Lewis Hamilton, given his past statistics at the track, as well as George Russell, you might want to go with the team of Mercedes there. So winning margin, again, Red Bull pace, just too much. You're going to want to go with the higher end there, the over 12 seconds, but unfortunately, you're going to pay for it in the odds there. Safety car, being a street course, being the fact that there are multiple passing zones at this track at St. Albert Park Circuit, not St. Albert, Albert Park Circuit, I should say, you're going to want to bet on that safety car being there as well. So just to recap, what are we looking out for this weekend? Carlos Sainz, is he going to be back in the Ferrari? If not, how does Oliver Behrman do? What's going on with Christian Horner and Max Verstappen over at Red Bull? In the meantime, they're winning races. They are the top choice for the win this weekend, specifically Max Verstappen. Next best, Charles Leclerc. After that, Mercedes. That's it. So we're looking ahead to the Formula One Rolex Australian Grand Prix. Again, I am CJ Radoon of rotowire.com, and I am here for Mystery Caution. And remember to subscribe so you don't miss any of our motorsports videos all season long, including NASCAR, IndyCar, and Formula One. You can access my columns through the link provided in the description of the video. And if you have any questions or comments, don't hesitate to let me know what is on your mind. And until next time, keep it out of the fence.